This is Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television. My name is Joshua Isha. Welcome you to the fresh episode of the program Back to Farm. On Back to Farm, there's a program that goes into the nooks and crannies of Nigeria to make sure we bring to you those things that are actually lucrative and attractive, thereby creating employment to the teeming unemployed Nigerian youth. Nigeria has been bedeviled with the issue of unemployment for quite some time. It's more reason why the Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television brings this program to your doorstep, so you can actually know that there are a lot of vocational and trade you can actually do, which of course the chunk of it is agriculture. And today on Back to Farm, we'll be looking at the cassava. Cassava is one of the most popular tuber crop in the world, and Nigeria is the largest producers of cassava in the world as we speak. And as such, we just want to take you around and of course a holistic background of the cassava tuber. So stay tuned and enjoy this interesting episode of the program Back to Farm. Nigeria is the largest cassava producer globally, accounting for about 1/5 of the total production worldwide. The demand for cassava and its constituents is high in the domestic economy. However, the supply has been unable to meet the huge demand. For instance, the supply-demand gap for high-quality cassava flour stands at about 485,000 metric tons per annum, while the gap for cassava starch is about 290,000 metric tons. Estimates have shown that Nigeria will need about 28.3 million metric tons of fresh cassava roots planted annually and about 1.2 million hectares of land to meet the country's demand for cassava, byproducts and derivatives. This documentary focuses on enhancing the economic potential of cassava production in Nigeria. Now, what is cassava? Cassava, also known as yucca or manioc cassava, is a tuber crop native to Africa. The root grows similarly to potatoes, yams or ginger, but the swelling underneath the need to store nutrients for the following season. For centuries, cassava was eaten by indigenous communities who live along the bank of Africa, where it is believed to have originated. From the ground up, cassava looks like a tall, thin tree with long leaves that can grow up to 3 meters in height. The thick root underneath the surface are what usually get consumed as food, but the leaves are commonly eaten in West African cuisines as well. There are 2 main varieties of cassava, sweet and bitter. The sweet variety is what you will find at your local supermarket in cassava-based products. Its flavor profile is mild, somewhat nutty and subtly sweet. When boiled, both its taste and texture are very reminiscent of a cooked potato ready for a mash or wedge of butter. Now, let's look at where does cassava grow. As Nigerian suggests, cassava grows well in tropical and subtropical climates, but its adaptability is what led to it becoming a global staple, one of the world's most drought-resistant crops. It can withstand various harsh conditions and thrive in poor-quality soils. Durability and adaptability made cassava a predominant food source throughout the developing world, and today it helps fuel over 800 million people across Africa, Asia, and today it helps to feed over 800 million people across Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Nigeria, to be precise, Thailand, the Democratic Republic of Congo are the biggest producers of cassava. Now, let's look at what is cassava used for. In addition to being nearly indestructible in the wild, cassava is also incredibly versatile. Once the roots are harvested, they can either be sold as aids or transformed into an army array of products. If bought whole, the root can be peeled, boiled, and then fried, mashed, or porridge. Their high level of starch can be extracted to create tapioca, a common thickener for dessert, soups, and manufactured foods. Tapioca is also the key indigenous of the jelly-like pills that is so many of use enjoy in boba teas. Cassava is the most popular crop in the whole of West Africa. According to research, the Nigerian restaurant had become a gathering place for the local Nigerian community and others who are fans of West African cooking. Preparation varieties according to region. But every part of cassava plant is used in West Africa. Experts explain that you can soak gari fermented cassava flour in cold water and eat it like a cereal with sugar, or you can mix it in boiling water to make eba. The fresh leaves of the plant are used to make soups with smoked fish. It is also the most common source of animal feed for goats and can be used as firewood once it's dried. Now let's talk about the cassava flour. Cassava can be ground and dried into a gluten gram and nut-free flour, making it a popular baking alternative for those with dietary restrictions. 95% of Nigerians use cassava dough, while 5% take it to undercooked because they are not used to the chewy texture of the cassava bread. Now, where can you find cassava? Raw cassava is commonly found in Nigerian market, especially those with extensive food section. You can also find cassava peeled and prepackaged in frozen food aisle. Now, let's look at how you prepare cassava. As mentioned above, raw cassava should always be peeled before being prepared. If you buy it frozen, the pieces of cassava will come pre-peeled and ready for a boil in salted water. Once it's soft and thoroughly cooked, the root can be fried to create delicious meals, which are great with highly Parmesan cheese or a steak dinner. You can also soak, ferment, grate, and preserve and press raw cassava in a cheesecloth to create gari flour, which is a process that typically takes about 3 days. You can also buy gari flour at the store. Now, gari is what you see in every student in Nigeria. On the back of gari, which gets soaked in cold water and sweetened with sugar or honey to create a cereal. Gari is also how you make eba. It is a swallow food in Nigeria. On the sweet of the spectrum, grated cassava can also be soaked with sugar and coconut cream, wrapped in banana leaves, and boiled to form sunam. Filipino snack familiar to the Mexican tamal. Other sweet recipes include Indonesian cool binga. Once you boil it, you can fry cassava with some butter and garlic, which tastes great. But I do say I eat cassava. Cassava contains synergenic glycoside, which release cyanide into the body. When consumed, soaking or cooking, the root thoroughly will eliminate small traces of cyanide, but those who consume yuca in large quantities prepare it improperly or don't eat enough protein, which helps rid the body of cyanide, are still at risk, particularly if they consume bitter cassava, which has up to 8 times the amount of cyanide as sweet cassava per kilogram. Consequently, expert warns against the consumption of bitter cassava since it requires a more thorough preparation process than sweet cassava to make it safe to eat. Although it can be found in markets in parts of Nigeria and is often used to make byproducts like cassava starch, flour, and condiments such as mayonnaise, casseroles, all of which involve heavy processing. It can also be used for bioethanol. One case of cassava poisoning that made international headlines took place in Venezuela in 2017, following the country's economic collapse and subsequent food shortage. 28 people in a Caracas suburb died within days of each other, leading someone to fear that the deadly virus was spreading within their community. The actual culprit was beta yucca, popularly known the beta cassava, which is illegal to sell as food in the world, but have been sold by black market vendors looking to make a quick profit. The victims have prepared the toxic tuber like its sweet counterpart and therefore hadn't thoroughly processed it to make it safe for consumption. Now, let's see if cassava does have any ecological benefits. Because so much of the developing world rallies on cassava for food security, the crop mass harvesting and subsequent ecological impact have made it target for the controversy. It's widely believed that improperly making cassava harvesting can lead to soil degradation, as the crop depletes essential nutrients from farmland as population and the developing world continue to rise. So does both the need for the food security and the demand for cassava. The result is mass deforestation and lower yields for the essential crops. And yet, if properly harvested, cassava can have ecological benefit, according to a recent report by the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. There is evidence that planting cassava may revive degraded land, making it suitable for other essential crops to grow. Studies on these possible benefits are ongoing, as environmentalists continue to voice concern about further deforestation in areas designated for cassava harvesting. But the effects of climate change, such as rising temperatures and more frequent droughts, mean that the hardy crop will remain a necessary component of our future food supply. Africa uses cassava almost just as much as Americans do. We can expect cassava to play a more prominent role in our day-to-day lives as we combat the side effects of climate change. The changes to our environment have encouraged research on cassava as a substitute for maize, which has experienced yield declines as temperature rise and annual rainfall levels drop. Some modern-day use include the manufacturing of fabrics, paper, and building materials like plywoods. Cassava has also been used in the pharmaceutical industry as an ingredient in medication, as well as a source of feed for livestock. With less corn being harvested, cassava has been as a probable supplier of sucrose syrup and bioethanol fuel. In other words, expect to see the world of environmentalism science and hopefully cooking the next time you find yourself scratching your head about what potato recipe to serve guests. Try your hand at any of the countless cassava-based recipes that span our world's diverse gastronomies.
To akalla dai yanzu zan iya cewa shekara na haura shekara 8 yanzu na fara noman rogo. Ok, shi rogo dai yanda ake fara nomansa idan ruwan sama ya sauka, muna zuwa kamar yanda yake haka, daga iccen shi ne bayan kayi noma za ka je ka samo iccensa, shi ne za ka zo ka yayyanka shi ɗaya bayan ɗaya. In kai noma sai ka bi kana shukawa. After ka shuka shi akwai lokacin gyara wanda zai yi, za ka zo za ka bi gonan, za ka gyara, kana ciccire mai ciyawa, kana ta mai da ƙasa a gindinsa, za ka gyara shi. Don aƙalla ana yi masa gyara daga 1 zuwa 3 tun daga fara noman shi. Za ka gyara shi, akwai lokacin da za ka ba shi ƙasa. Kamar yanzu yadda kake ganin wannan abin da ya rage yanzu kawai zuwa gaba za a zo a ciccire masa ciyawa ne kawai. Wannan an gama aikinsa kenan, don ya kai aiki na 3 wanda aka yi ma wannan yanzu ta haka yanda ake noma rogo kenan. To wahalan noman rogo a nan shine kusan in ce gaba ɗaya aikin akwai wahala, amma ainihin da major wahala ɗin shine daga shi farkon yin kunya ɗin sai kuma gyara na ƙarke wanda shine ban ƙasan shi, shine ainihin aiki masu wahala a cikinsa kenan. Idan ka noma yanzu sai Allah ya kai mu baɗi lokacin da ruwan sama ya sauka, to lokacin ne ake cire rogo bayan shekara kenan. A'a, mu ma muna amfani da shi muna ci, amma muna nomawa kuma muna saida. Idan akwai mu da kasuwa da muke zuwa da shi, akwai inyamurai ma wanda suke zuwa har gona, za ku yi ciniki su saya su cire sannan su je da shi. To akalla idan ka sa kuɗi naira 50,000 kai noman rogo da shi, idan Allah ya albarkaci abun kana iya samun 800, 700 akalla dai kenan insha Allah. Akwai riba sosai a ciki. To shawarin da zan iya ba wanda zai iya zuwa ya ce zai fara shiga noman rogo yanzu, gaskiya lokaci ya juya yanzu wanda ake buƙatan jari. Noman rogo ba ƙaramin alheri ne a ciki ba, don ana samun alkhairi ba kaɗan ba. Mu abin da ke ɗan takura matsalar mu yanzu rashin jari ɗin ne, don kaga gonakin nan da ka gani duk kusan mallakin mu ne. To rashin jari ne wanda mutum zai tsaya ya yi shi sosai, to shi yasa muke amfani da ɗan ƙalilan jarin da muke da shi